Hello, all right.
No, I can hear you.
Perfect.
Good.
So, first, I would like to ask you just about your work for 350.org. If you could just tell me a little bit about that.
Absolutely. We founded 350.org in January of 2008. When I say we, I mean me and 7 college students. They were seniors at Middlebury. We didn't have any money or really know what we were doing, but we knew that we needed to build a global movement about climate change, something there hadn't been to date. And so we went to work. Each one of those 7 students basically took a continent. And the guy who took the Antarctic had to take the internet also, And we went to work. And in the, I guess now 4 years since, we've organized about 20,000 demonstrations and rallies in every country but North Korea. CNN called it the most widespread political activity in the planet's history. So it's gone pretty well in those terms, although, of course, we're still losing in the fight to stop climate change.
Okay. And what are 350's goals for Vermont specifically?
Well, I mean, Vermont, since that's where we started, is an important place. And it's been a big part of this fight. One of the things that we hope this year will happen is that we're doing this big day based around climate impacts, around places that have felt the sting of global warming already. And of course, Vermont is high on that list now. After Hurricane Irene, we really know what record rainfall does and, have some real empathy for people in places like Pakistan or Thailand or El Salvador or places that have seen the same kind of horrible flooding with even more deaths and destruction. So we hope that Vermont will play a big role. Vermont's already played a big role in terms of energizing our political leaders to really go to work on these issues. Senator Sanders, especially, Representative Welch, especially, Governor Shumlin, especially, Senator Leahy, all these people have become real leaders in the fight on climate change at a state and national level. And of course, within the state of Vermont, 350 keeps working with others to try and help Vermont along in its goals to become more climate neutral. And Vermont's made some steps, not as many as we all hope, but in certain ways it's gone farther than a lot of other states, and we'll keep pushing for that.
And what do you consider to be the biggest roadblocks in terms of energy for Vermont to overcome?
Well, if you look around Vermont, we have the at the moment our electricity is fairly low carbon because it comes from Vermont Yankee and it comes from Hydro-Quebec. That doesn't mean it's clean. As you know, Vermont Yankee is, most people in the state want it shut down, and as it shuts down, it'll be a challenge to figure out how to replace it with real clean energy, clean, local, renewable energy. So that's one big fight. And of course, being a rural state, statistically, Vermont's the most rural state in the Union, we burn a lot of gasoline moving people around, and we have to figure out how to rebuild our train networks, how to put buses far more to work along our major corridors, things like that. And we need very badly to weatherize every house in Vermont so that we're no longer spending the winter heating the outdoors, which is really what happens an awful lot in thin, old houses that lack insulation, and where the heat just moves right out the window.
Ways to make it more accessible to lower income communities? How would you feel about something like that?
I think that that's very important. And of course, that helps you serve a double goal, right? So when we think about, say, weatherizing homes, the very first places we should begin are with the lowest income Vermonters, all right? Because they're the people that can least afford to be wasting money heating the outdoors. every dollar that we're able to spend putting in decent windows and insulation in the homes of low-income Vermonters is a dollar they then don't have to spend for oil, and instead they can be buying food for their kids or whatever it is that they need. So that's, I think, very much where we need to begin, and it's something that Montpelier's been pretty good about trying to figure out how to do.
Mm-hmm. And have they come up with any solutions for that?
Sure, there are all kinds of programs. Unfortunately, I mean, there's always the question is coming up with enough money to pay for them. In fact, I'm afraid that the latest I saw was that the weatherization budget in the state may get cut this year, and there's talk of 50 people or so losing their jobs doing this kind of work. That would be a very bad, tragic idea. Probably we should put a small surcharge on gasoline, and that would help us pay to continue to do this kind of work.
Okay. And what kind of alternative energies do you feel are best suited for Vermont in particular?
Well, we need some of everything. So, places where it's windy, we need wind turbines. We can use solar power despite our high latitude. I have solar panels all over my roof. Some of them provide electricity. You know, I'm speaking to you now through Skype via the electricity that fell on the roof this afternoon. Mm-hmm. But some of them, those panels also provide hot water, and that's very cost effective and easy to do. And Vermonters should be making far more use of that than we are at the moment. We have hydro resources in this state, running water, that it makes sense to exploit. So, for instance, in Middlebury, we're getting ready, I hope, to rebuild the turbine along the waterfall in the middle of town. 100 years ago, it provided a lot of power, mm-hmm. And it could, go back to providing the power that probably 500 homes need in Middlebury. And that's a lot of homes in a town like Middlebury. Okay. We have other resources we can put to use. Increasingly, we're figuring out how to use cow manure, that methane, as a source of electric generation. So those are, sort of representative of the kinds of alternative sources we can get. Of course, if we're smart, the thing we'll do first, and one of the things Vermont's done best, is really remarkable efforts at conservation, because the less energy you have to provide, the easier it is to do these alternative kind of things. And Vermont's sort of efficiency utility, we call it Efficiency Vermont, it is really one of the world leaders in this kind of work, and it needs constantly to be expanded.
And do you feel that Vermont is a role model for the rest of the United States, or sometimes?
I don't think Vermont is as much of a role model as it sometimes thinks it must be. Mm-hmm. We're still, in a certain sense, coasting some on green innovations that we made 20 and 30 years ago in this state, things like the founding of Efficiency Vermont. But now there's a lot of other states that are doing a better job of things like what we call renewable portfolio standards, setting bars for how much renewable energy there has to be in a state, things like that. So Vermont is not at the head of the pack on everything, and given how committed many of our citizens are to this kind of work, Vermont really should be at the head of the pack.
All right, and what is something great that Vermont is doing to become more energy efficient, energy independent, and what is something that we could definitely improve upon? So
Efficiency Vermont is the best example of, they get a certain amount of money off the electric bill that we all pay, and they use it to go around and do energy efficiency things at factories, in offices, increasingly in homes. And it pays off 4 and 5 to 1. It's a great investment, and it's one that people around the rest of the world take seriously. So when I'm in China, say, I just finished a big piece for National Geographic on energy in China, and talked to a lot of people in China. And they all think, because so many experts from Vermont have come over to help them, like the 2 states they know about in the U.S. tend to be Vermont and California. And in their mind, like, they're sort of those are like the two big states in America, you know. And I don't even bother telling them that Vermont is a little fly speck, you know, compared to California. So that's a thing we really could, you know, that we really can be proud of. We could do much better than we're doing, I think, in terms of transportation. If you go around Vermont, you see that every little town has a little train depot that 75 years ago, you know, a train came to. And now we've let all that fall to pieces, and all the train depots are, you know, coffee shops or art galleries or something like that. It'll be really good to get those trains working again. There's some real investment being made now in trains on the east side of the state. The federal government is going to put in a higher speed rail connection along the east side of the state, and the next obvious thing is to go to work on the west side of the state. I'd love in Middlebury to be able to get on a train and end up in Burlington in an hour, or in New York City in 4 or 5 hours. That would be elegant, you know, and it would help a lot in terms of energy use.
Okay, and as a student or just as a community member in Vermont, how would I go about changing the transportation system that we have here?
Well, you got to the only way to do any of this work is to get involved with other people doing the same kind of thing. That's why we set up 350.org. Each of us working as individuals is largely powerless. When we come together in groups that are really effective and campaign hard, then we have some chance, you know. So, 350.org is mostly young people in Vermont, as it is in much of the rest of the world. You know, they're not mostly old people like me, mostly younger people. And it's a really good thing to be involved with.
That's great. Okay. Thank you very much for your time.